Chapter 18, the symbol of the serpent. Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, hath God said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said unto the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God hath said, Ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die. And the serpent said unto the woman, Ye shall not surely die, for God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. Genesis 3:1-5. In that remote period during which both sacred and profane history admit the fact that the gods confabulated with infant humanity, the serpent was the symbol of the god Saturn. In Egypt, Sat-an, later Saturn, giver of esoteric wisdom, one of the Elohim, the sons of God. He is referred to in Job as the great initiator sent by the Lord to test Job, the whole book of Job being the story of an initiation. From the earliest ages, the serpent was recognized as the symbol of esoteric wisdom. Many nations worship it as a symbol of the sun, the giver of life. Only during the dark ages of medieval history was it degraded and limited to signify the force of evil, or de-evil. Jesus recognized the serpent as a symbol of good when he admonished his disciples, Be ye therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves. The Assyrian priests were called serpents, as were also the Druid priests. The masters of wisdom and all initiates into the sacred mysteries are called Nagas, or serpents of wisdom, because by overcoming temptations they are said to have cast off their outer skin and to have been born again, thus becoming sons of will and wisdom and immortal. They have met the great initiator and have wrested from him his rod of power. Again, the serpent is an old glyph for the astral light, the medium of both white and black magic, good in its spiritual aspect but evil in its lower. The primitive symbol of the serpent symbolized divine wisdom and perfection, and has always stood for psychical regeneration and immortality. Hermes called the serpent the most spiritual of all creatures. Moses, initiated into the wisdom of Hermes, called it more subtle than any beast of the field. The strange veneration in which the Ophites held the serpent, which represented Christos, may become less perplexing if the students would but remember that at all the ages the serpent was the symbol of divine wisdom, which kills in order to resurrect, destroys but to rebuild the better. Moses is made a descendant of Levi, a serpent tribe. Gautama Buddha is of a serpent lineage through the Naga, or serpent race of kings who reigned in Magadha. Hermes, or the god Thoth, in his snake symbol is Tet, and according to the Ophite legends, Jesus or Christos is born from a snake, divine wisdom or Holy Ghost. That is, he became a son of God through his initiation into the serpent science. From time immemorial, the serpent has symbolized the sex force, good when lifted up, as Moses lifted it up in the wilderness, that all were suffering and dying from the stings of the poisonous vipers, the perversions of the sex force, might be healed by the vision of purity revealed by the brazen serpent, evil when allowed to crawl in the mire of earth, biting the heel of the woman, and placing enmity between her seed and it. It is said that before our globe became egg-shaped, and the universe also, a long trail of cosmic dust or fire mist moved and writhed like a serpent in space. Thus our globe was prepared by the serpent force for the great test humanity came to this planet to experience. That is, the ability to control the creative power and create in the image of God through the spiritualization and perfect blending of the separated sexes. This great lesson, when learned, will enable man to become as one of us, or divine. After man became involved in matter, as outlined in chapter 13, and the androgynous third race had gradually evolved through its various stages, the separation of the sexes took place. This, however, was not a sudden change affecting the entire race, but was the result of a gradual evolution lasting through the entire latter half of that race. This is symbolized by the story of Eve being taken from Adam, soulless, while he was in a deep sleep. The deep sleep being the pralaya, or night period between the third and fourth races, during which the separation was perfected. The word Adam means red earth and refers to the third race in which the humanity of the red ray was first clothed in an earthly body. The Adam and Eve spoken of later as one man and one woman symbolizes the sexes functioning separately in the great Atlantean or fourth race. Hence the dawn of the fourth race. The androgynous forms of the early third race had disappeared, and only the separated sexual forms known to us today remained. In one sense, the Garden of Eden symbolizes the pure and perfect physical body in which infant humanity was originally clothed. According to the same symbology, the tree which is in the midst of the garden is the spinal cord, the sap of which is the Kundalini force or the serpent force, a dynamic creative power functioning through the spinal cord, its lower aspect being expressed through the sex organs, and its highest aspect functioning through the pineal gland. The fruit of this tree is the spiritual power gained as the result of the opening of that which is known as the third eye. As man, through experience, gains wisdom, he uses this mystic power gradually to bring about its higher physical manifestations, as well as the psychic and spiritual. It slowly ascends the spinal cord through the central canal until it reaches and stimulates into activity the pineal gland, the function of which is called the opening of the eye of wisdom. It is not, however, the physiological change in this organ which opens man's consciousness to divine wisdom, but following the biological law, function makes structure. It is the attainment of the higher function which results in the anatomical and physiological change. Only through the functioning of this Kundalini power can mankind gain the experiences that both good and evil have to teach. A moment's thought as to the early symbology will show that there is an underlying meaning common to all. Saturn, the initiator, Satan, the tempter, the astral light, the creative power of sex, etc. Namely that it is, in very truth, the power to become as gods that is indicated. Being the distinctive heritage of the fourth race, this power to create sexually became at the same time the great temptation and the great opportunity. In fact, it was the one experience for which this globe was created, and for which humanity fell into generation and became clothed with coats of skin. The infant race at its outset was confronted by the initiator, Saturn, the serpent, who was commissioned to impart, as the crowning gift, the creative power, which humanity only then was prepared to receive. The so-called temptation was but a test of man's ability either to use or abuse this divine gift. Ever since that time, man and woman individually have had to meet the same test. Man, created in the image of God and endowed with the God power of creativeness, must prove his ability to use his power wisely, or through its abuse, learn the lesson and gain through suffering the experience that physical existence in separated sexes alone can teach. The power was given him not as a temptation, but as a step in evolution through which he must pass in perfect purity. Just as in this day a teacher who gives out a new advanced truth is condemned for the evil resulting from its misuse, so Saturn, or Satan, has had to bear the responsibility arising from the failure of man to use the creative power in purity and holiness. Man has chosen to become as gods, knowing the evil through the misuse of this power, but ere the cycle closes, must become as gods to know the good. The culmination of his degradation was reached by the Atlanteans, who not only used this force for animal gratification, but also perverted it to accomplish their horrible practices of black magic. It was for this sin that the continent of Atlantis and most of its inhabitants were destroyed. While the sinking of Atlantis destroyed much of the dangerous knowledge of how to pervert this force into black magic or evil, yet enough remained to perpetuate evil and misery on earth and make a hell out of what was given to man to be his paradise. The whole experience, including the sin and suffering which the perversion of this force has created, is an initiation, not only for the race, but also for the planet, which when successfully passed will make the planet the completion of the octave of the system and the beginning of a new and greater system. The banishment of Adam and Eve from Eden was due to the fact they could not face the flaming sword of purity, which turned every way and barred them from obtaining the fruit of the tree. This banishment meant that man could no longer dwell in the etherealized body, or Eden, with his spiritual faculties freely functioning and able to talk face-to-face with God. Instead, the immortal soul is forced to dwell in a body of dense physical matter with the spiritual centers dormant, so that only by the sweat of his brow can he obtain spiritual bread. This means that only by laborious effort can man open the inner doors that communicate with the higher planes and consciously bring to himself the spiritual food upon which his soul must live. At every attempt to re-enter Eden, man is met by the angel of the flaming sword placed by God to guard the tree of immortal life from man's impurity. "Thou shalt surely die" is usually considered a penalty for man's defilement of Eden, but in reality even this death sentence was but the working of the immutable law of divine love. For immortality under conditions of impurity, sickness, and suffering would be a punishment far surpassing even the medieval conception of a physical hell. Only when man can face his sword of the Spirit and allow it to cleave from him every cloak of impurity, and once more enter the garden naked but not ashamed, can he meet the Lord God, walking in the garden in the cool of the day. The cool of the day refers to the close of the cycle of wandering outside the garden. The day period, the period of stress and strain, of heat and passion, which both the individual and the race must face and conquer ere they can attain poise or cool, quiet perception, in which state alone they can become aware of the Lord God or the law of good manifesting in the garden of their human personality. The so-called temptation was the act of one of the sons of God, who was the direct channel through which the power to create reached humanity. The giver of this gift, Saturn or Lucifer, star of the morning, is a bright archangel who fell or descended from heaven to confer this gift of immortality upon man. Saturn or Satan is that aspect of Jehovah which brought humanity its great test, and in this sense may be regarded as its tempter or initiator, while Lucifer is that aspect of the same force which confers the crown of victory on those who conquer. There are many passages referring to him as one of the Elohim. This personification, denominated Satan, is to be contemplated from three different planes: the Old Testament, the Christian Fathers, and the ancient Gentile attitude. He is supposed to have been represented by the serpent in the Garden of Eden. Nevertheless, the epithet of Satan is nowhere in the Hebrew sacred writings applied to that or any other form of Ophidian. His so-called fall was by no means one of sin or failure, but a voluntary descent to earth to bring to man the creative fire, the gift of the gods, for only through the mastery and proper use of this force can immortality be obtained. The story of Prometheus is but another expression of this ideograph. There is no evil outside mankind that can produce a Satan in the orthodox sense of the devil. It is only through terrible perversions of the creative power that it has become the evil or de-evil, as time passed, by his vile, lustful thoughts on this subject and his misuse of the life force. Man has created a composite thought form which may be said to be entitized into a living force of evil, commonly called the devil, which, with an army of so-called lesser devils, arrayed in serried ranks, continually fights against the power of good or God. These are the vipers that tormented the children of Israel and all other races. This army must be met by good, and will be annihilated only when thought forms of purity are sent forth by man in sufficient numbers and force to overcome the evil creations. Being the creation of man, functioning in its lowest aspect, this evil can be conquered only by man, its creator. The conquering must take the form of a transmutation, that is, the substitution of vitalized thoughts of love and purity for those of lust and evil. In the childhood of the race, a great wave of serpent worship, originally intended to symbolize this truth and its purity, spread over the world. This, however, in time became degraded, and the reptile itself was finally worshipped as a god. It was kept in a filthy den, and the youth and beauty of the land were thrown to it for prey. It was fed on human beings until it grew fat, and the stench of it filled all the temple, even to the outer courts. Humanity is again walking in the same old path according to the law of cycles, and today is but repeating the sad story upon a higher plane, the mental. First, undue exaltation and worship, as witnessed in the days of phallicism, then materialization and consequent defilement, until today the world's idea of the serpent power, sex, is that of a monster grown fat upon the youth and beauty of the land. The teaching in regard to the sex function have always been held most sacred, and for this reason they have been veiled from humanity in general and revealed only to those whose purity of heart and life permitted them to grasp something of their deeper truth. Because of this veiling of the truth, there have sprung up in the minds of those not instructed in the mysteries many misconceptions, chief of which is that this great God-given power is in and of itself inherently impure and accursed. This belief has given rise to doctrines which teach man to despise and try and kill out this greatest of gifts. But as long as this serpent of sex is accursed and degraded by man's thought, it is doomed to crawl upon the ground and bring forth its progeny of vipers and darkness and filth. And woman is doomed to conceive and bring forth in pain and suffering instead of purity and joy. Woman has suffered the most, but by that suffering she should have developed her spiritual intuition. The sex force is considered impure only because the spiritually blind have decreed that it shall be considered impure. They assume that they are wiser and holier than he who created them, he who breathed into them the living fire of creative force. Being wiser than the gods, they have decreed that the normal expression of the sex function within the married relation shall be considered vile, and it shall go and be suppressed. The result is already apparent. Go over the world's history and you'll find that after every period during which the marriage relation, consummated in pure and holy love, was relegated to second place in gaining spiritual development, and the normal sex function was taught to be inherently impure and calculated to hold back the participants from spiritual growth and final liberation, that it was something to be suppressed and killed out, there invariably followed a wave of licentiousness in which filthy substitutes, practiced for so-called mere physical release, were not only condoned but taught as preferable to the normal relation, and taught in the name of religion, or spiritual development, or occult or esoteric science. If such practices were advocated by the outcast of humanity, the world would stand aghast, and societies for the suppression of the vice would quickly spring up. But when such perverted teachings are given out under the name of spiritual or esoteric truth, as though secrecy could make impurity pure, by those who are well advanced upon the path, many blinded ones forget even the common standards of morality and decency, and eagerly clutch at such an excuse for the gratification of inherent vileness under the cloak of esoteric teaching, which lends to it an air of respectability. The greater the height attained, the more disastrous the fall. The greater the influence of such a teacher, the more serious and far-reaching the effects of the lapse from purity. Instead of there being any latitude permitted to those who are advanced upon the path of attainment, the rules are far more strict. What would be but a slight lapse from virtue in a savage or in an ignorant becomes a cyclone of inequity sweeping many before it, in one who has entered the inner degrees of occultism. For upon each inner step every vibration is multiplied 1,000-fold. This is why the disciple should absolutely master, or gain perfect control of, not suppress, all life forces ere he attempts to enter the inner degrees, or his failure is foreordained. Let this point be clearly understood. There can be no spiritual teachings of any kind, either esoteric or exoteric, that are not founded upon absolute purity, not only of body but of mind. The higher and more esoteric the teaching, the more rigid the standard of purity. All planes interblend, and all acts upon the physical plane have their correspondence upon all other planes. Therefore, what is impure on the lowest plane is 1,000 times more so upon each successive inner plane. If a pilgrim were approaching a sacred shrine, he would not knowingly enter with his feet slimed with the mud of the public highway, and hope to leave no stain upon the pure alabaster floor of the inner court, for even the faintest footstep would be more noticeable there than the filth that covered the public highway an inch deep. This subject has been the greatest stumbling block for many teachers who are otherwise trying to uplift humanity, because it is the greatest test of the humanity on this globe. Only when this lesson is learned will others await it under different conditions. But there must be some brave souls who are willing now to face the world's misconceptions and slander and stand boldly for the uplifting and purifying of the subject. The world must be taught the difference between the wise, normal use of this function in perfect purity, in the married relation only, and killing it out or suppressing it. Many talk loudly about overcoming and killing out this force, but if you could look into their hearts, you would see that their overcoming is usually but satiety. They have crawled through the filthy places of life and have slimed their impure ideas of sex over everything until they have grown sick. Then they put on monkish habits and talk loudly about having outgrown all such animal instincts. Many others have never known anything but the impure side of sex. Their ideals have been so shattered by contact with the world's misconception that they, in their natural purity, have put the thought of it from them as something too vile to be considered. This shrinking from the subject is a natural result of the world's attitude. For alas, even those who set themselves up as teachers on the subject are apt to but stir up the filth and leave things worse than they were before. This is invariably the rule if the world's standards of morality are ruthlessly set aside, especially those pertaining to the legal marriage relation, which is not only a sacred sacrament, a symbol of the marriage of the soul, the union with the higher self, becoming one with the Father in heaven, but is also a bulwark of safety to society that must never, under any pretext, be weakened. As to the final disuse of this function, as long as man has his present anatomical structure and physiological functions, he must learn how to bring to perfection, purify, and use for its highest purpose the body and functions he now possesses, and not waste time speculating on what conditions will obtain in future world periods. For only when new conditions are given him can he grasp more advanced lessons. It doth not appear what we shall be. I shall be satisfied when I awake with thy likeness. But we cannot awake until we have purified and used every function we possess for the glory of God. Hence the order of the 15 desires to teach humanity how to prepare for the future by taking the next step here and now. The time has come when woman must take her place as the priestess of the Most High, the revealer of purity and truth to man. She it is who must lift the corner of the veils that hides the face of the Divine Mother Isis. Isis is called the Divine Mother because hers is the force, both in nature and humanity, that brings forth. She is spoken of as having 7 veils, alluding to the protection thrown around the sacred mysteries connected with the bringing into manifestation of the creative force, God the Father, sent out through the masculine expression. The 7 veils are the mysteries upon the 7 planes of consciousness and manifestations. The first and the lowest of these veils, the mystery of physical birth, has never yet been lifted, nor can it be by profane hands. In the ancient temples of Isis, it was death to so much as touch the veil before her shrine, and on many tablets recently unearthed a carven serpent has been found having 7 heads, which symbolizes the same mystery. The Phoenicians are said to have originated the alphabet from the symbols made by the writing of the sacred serpents. This was another advance or creation and evolution attributed to the serpent god Saturn. For letters serve to manifest ideas, and their invention placed man upon a new step in evolution. Since through the ages woman has been made the plaything of man and taught to use her powers to entice and beguile him as the only method by which she could attain her ends. In this new women's era, she is confronted with tasks which her training makes most difficult, that is, the facing of herself and her real motives. From which she must turn her feminine powers of love, intuition, and beauty to the upliftment of the race, instead of to the beguilement of man, that she may satisfy her vanity, love of conquest, and desire for creature comforts. Although man, being the positive pole upon the earth plane, by his superior physical powers, has throughout the ages enslaved woman, still woman, upon the more subtle plane of desire, has dominated and enslaved man. Hence it is woman who must break the shackles, first of her own desires and then for the race. This she can never do by playing upon man's chivalry to attain the gratification of her own ends, be those ends love, ambition, vanity, ease, and comfort, or whatnot. Many otherwise admirable women have debased their God-given instincts, love of home and desire for children, first by awakening and playing upon man's animal passions to satisfy their ambition, and then by appealing to his chivalry, forcing him into what must inevitably prove an unhappy marriage. For quite as many men are blinded and led from the path of purity because of women's ambitions and desires as women are led astray through man's passion. And until woman awakens to her responsibility and understands her real mission, that is, her powers to play upon man's heart, stimulate his noblest aspirations, and thus lead him to the heights of spiritual attainment, instead of into mere physical union without love, she will continue to be the slave she is today in spite of any political or social liberty she may obtain. It is woman who must lift up the world's ideas of the sex force from the mire and degradation of man's misconception and give this great power its proper place in the temple of the living God, the body, as the highest expression of the divine in man. Just as it was woman who gave to man the apple of discord, so must woman pluck the golden apples that grow at the top of the tree of life and give them to man to eat.